All right, we're live.
Hey, how are you
Hey, buddy.
doing?
Good, man.
So
How are you?
always a few steps that go on before we go live in there, like call in, StreamYard. It's just ever increasing broadcast to multiple channels at the same time. Yeah, very well. I'm looking forward to today's topic. I think not often discussed actually pricing. And when I say today's topic, and
Yeah.
we've got a whole mini series coming up for people, which I'm delighted about, based on your book around pricing. So this is great. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Me too. It's a dreary, horrible day in Seattle here, rain but we'll brighten the day with fun podcasting. So let's jump into it. You ready to bounce in? And if you're listening with us live, we would love to have you say hello, leave a comment underneath the Facebook group you're in or the YouTube channel if that's where you're listening from,
Yeah,
and
and look,
ask questions along the way if you'd like to as
and
well.
this is me trying to get social media savvy because I'm such a podcaster, sort of dyed in the wool now. But why don't you tell us where you're coming from and what the weather is? Which is a very British way of talking, by the way. The Brits are obsessed with saying
Mm.
Americans are obsessed with trying to find out if they come from the same state. It seems, but British people are just obsessed with talking about the weather. And I can tell you that the weather is kind of summery, and I can hear birds tweeting. So for once, it's not raining in Britain. It does happen. So tell us where you're coming from, what the weather is, as a
Yes.
soft, easy win, and then after that, tell us what you think as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Right then, Jason, are we ready to record
Yeah, let's do it,
today's?
man. Yeah.
Here we go. In today's challenging economy, pricing strategy is an incredibly important management responsibility. In today's episode, we're going to discuss 3 proven pricing strategies and the number 1 pricing principle from Jason's book, Pricing Power. Jason, delighted to talk about this topic. I think it's really under discussed. So let's talk about these 3
Yeah.
pricing strategies. Tell us
Yeah,
more
yeah.
about that.
Happy to jump into this one. I think the more the economy changes and more feel like we're in maybe a recession or certainly inflationary period. I mean, there's no doubt about that at this point. All of us as e-commerce sellers are asking similar questions, which include how do I manage my pricing effectively? And costs are going up, and competition is doing weird things with their pricing, and it puts us in a very, very awkward position as e-commerce sellers. And so I wrote Pricing Power a good number of years ago. Actually, it's been around for a while. It's 13 pricing principles. You can find it on Amazon. Get the Kindle version. This conversation is going to be deep dive into principle number 1 and the components of it. And yeah, as you mentioned, we're excited to be able to do ongoing conversations around these various principles in the book. So happy to jump into this. The first principle is powerful and important, and I think it sort of frames the whole discussion and conversation nicely. So are we ready to share the principle?
Absolutely, yeah. What is the first principle then?
The first principle of pricing is you need a pricing strategy or pricing methodology. Now, that sounds so obvious. It's like, wait, what? But the underlying thesis there is you can't wing it, or you shouldn't wing it. And you really should have a strategy that you've thought through and that you can say, yes, this is our approach as a company to pricing. And I think that's a really, really important first foundational principle to sort out for yourself.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I've recently, and thanks to your inspiration, so I listened to the e-commerce leader, and I went away and bought the book Competitive Strategic Analysis, I think by Porter. And one of the things that has emerged quickly from his thoughts, I'm sort of working my way through it. It's a dense book, but is that strategy involves accepting payoffs. Or trade-offs rather, not payoffs, not getting bribed. Trade-offs. So if you have one thing, you can't have the other. And this is a classic thing. So you can't have a product that you're positioning as really premium and yet sell tons of them for low price. Those 2 things are incompatible. And I think this is, and that's his way of defining strategy is what are
Hmm.
you going to focus on and what are you willing to sacrifice? And I think that's very grown up thinking because everyone wants
Yeah.
to have their cake and eat it. And even our prime minister here in the UK said, I'm rather pro having my cake and pro eating it. But I just thought, well, the whole point of that saying is that you got to choose. So I
Yeah.
really like the fact that you've got to have a strategy, and for me the word strategy includes the word trade-off, and I guess we'll be getting into that as we get into the strategies that you talk about.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's the first follow on question after is what if you have a strategy, well, then the question is what should your strategy be? What are the appropriate strategies that you can bring to the party or follow tried and true practices. And so that's sort of the gist of the conversation today. That's what we want to dig into. Yeah.
Perfect. So tell us about the first pricing strategy then, which will be presumably a trade-off with other things that we might have to choose between. So what's the first choice?
Yeah, and these will be common ideas as we kind of dig into them with people. But you've heard these phrases before. But I think the question is, how do you decide upon them? The first one is premium pricing, um, and the premium pricing idea or model is being the high-priced seller in your category, um, and uh, and so that's the first choice to make: is do you want to be the premium pricing person or the high priced leader? That's a hard position to take, and there's reasons why it could work amazingly, and there's reasons why it could work badly or won't work. But the first question is, can you be the high priced leader? If you can be the high priced leader in your niche or industry, it is the most favorable or most optimal position. And that, in my view, is the thing to think through. How could you be the high price leader? Because it provides the most margin on a per unit basis, and it positions you in the mind of the consumer as the leader in the space. The leader generally has pricing power. The leader generally is the one that can price themselves high and maintain that high pricing with the support of the user community. And so, for all those reasons, asking yourself, if you can be in that slot, is the first thing to think about. All right, thoughts on that, Michael? But
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, first of all, I think it's often something that people think they're doing, but they're not really doing. Sorry, I just realized there's me someone calling. Sorry,
yeah,
let me try again. Two platform itis there. Yes, very much makes sense that it would be a desirable thing to go for. I think a lot of people think they're practicing premium pricing strategies, but I think they want to have their cake and eat it. In other words, they want to sell a lot at a high price.
hmm
And obviously, I guess that can be possible, right? Nike does that with trainers and other examples we can think of in the consumer space. I mean, iPhone is an example of that in the phone space, but Apple used to make the trade-off that they were quite clear that they were a premium product and they weren't interested in mass market penetration at a certain stage of their development, or they may have been willing to sacrifice it, put it that way. And I think a lot of people in the Amazon space, particularly, have really struggled with the idea that there's a trade-off between how many units you sell per month and the profit per unit. And obviously, if you get it right, you can maximize profits.
yeah.
But they really, I see people, even otherwise intelligent people, struggle to let go of one or the other. What's your
hmm
experience with working with clients on that, or your own experience of that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people take the emotional. We can hear you typing really loudly. I don't know why today it's extra loud, but anyway. Uh, uh, okay. I think a lot of people take a back of the envelope approach to pricing and they say to themselves, oh, this is as high as I can price. I can't price any higher. But when you ask them that question, like why, they'll say, well, that's a dollar or two above the competitor that I'm aware of that I know is sort of a good competitor or the biggest competitor. Or maybe that's it's that thinking. Very few people have split tested their pricing up and down the price point, kind of scale, and said to themselves, "What will the market bear?" and what happens to my per unit economics at the various price points. And so, honestly, a lot of times people don't know if they could be the high price leader because they haven't ever tested the thesis with a live fire exercise like on Amazon or on the internet. Like, can you be the high price leader? Well, I don't think so. Well, have you tested it? No. And so, but it takes courage to kind of do that, and you have to be willing to ruin your sales for a day, a week, a month, whatever, if you fail that test. But if you don't fail that test, that's a really, really interesting place to be in. And so I think the first thing to do is to not just say at a gut level, what do I think is true, but say, how can I prove what's true with some tests and document, outcomes, have an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, use tools like Splitly. I don't know that that's still a tool for Amazon, but tools that will allow you to serial or A/B test over time, longitudinal testing of your pricing and see what the market will bear. because it makes all the difference on your unit economics. And to your point, sometimes even selling lower volume, but at a higher price, will net you better unit economics that you could be happier with for the long term.
Yes, indeed. I think sorry, I'm muting his. Yes, indeed. So, I would say, I mean, I think Splitly's now gone away because I think Amazon does some of the activities they used to do in terms of split testing. I can't remember honestly that I've not run a split test on Amazon for a while. What I would say is this, that actually you can go a lot further than that, and you can actually use software these days with private label products. It's not been a common thing with reselling. There's been a lot of software around for a lot of time for Amazon specifically that will enable you to resell. A lot of that is rules based, so it can be quite primitive, and it can end up, getting the buy box and getting you sales at the cost of your profits. And obviously, there's a payoff there. So if you use tools, you need to know the nature of the tool and how to use it. There
You
is a
said
really
reselling tools, but you mean repricing tools?
no, I mean, so sorry. What I mean is repricing tools for
Yeah.
resellers.
Right,
Sort of what
right,
I
right.
should have
Yeah.
said. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
for picking up. I realize what gobbledygook I'm speaking. Repricing tools for
Yes.
resellers, which
Yes.
it's hard to keep your head straight with this stuff sometimes. But there is actually a really cool tool that I just want to mention that's a repricer for private label or custom products, which is harder to engineer because you need to pick specific competitors and it needs a more sophisticated system. And that's run by guys over at Eva, who I've been working with to sort of help them develop the kinds of features that private label sellers really need. And that's quite exciting because they've integrated stock control into it, which is a whole another flip side of the whole pricing debate, isn't it? If you put your price up, stock tends to move less quickly, and that can be good. If you're going to go out of stock, that ruins your profits and sales. So anyway, they've got an engine that combines the two, and it does it in an automated way, and they see an increase of 30% in profits by doing that. So repricing automatically can, done right, really push up the profits as well.
Yeah, e-commerce or sellers on Amazon should check that out. I mean, they're a show sponsor, right? So
That's
for your
right,
shows
absolutely.
and for this
Yeah,
show,
yeah,
so you've
yeah.
really found some interesting elements of that I think are very important. And so, yeah, to your point, if you're on Amazon, you need to do the work to figure out what you can do as a pricing strategy, not just simply wing it, as they say. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so what's the second strategy then? So premium pricing sounds very attractive. I mean, I guess
Mhm.
before we move on, we ought to talk about how real is it to position yourself as premium? What's the cost? Everything has a cost or a thing you've got to do to get it. What's the kind of cost for getting premium pricing?
How do you mean the cost?
So I mean, what do you have to do to get it? The downside of it?
The downside of premium pricing? You mean if
Yes.
you try to become the premium price offerer in your marketplace and you fail?
Well, that's one thing, yeah. And also, what are the downsides? But also, what do you have to do to achieve it? I suppose that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, you have to price your product higher than anybody else, and customers have to buy it. I mean, sorry, then I don't mean to be coy about it, but I mean that the market will tell you if you can be the high priced leader, if you can be the premium pricer, right? The customer will say to themselves, "This is higher than everybody else, but I'm willing to buy it." You have to give them a reason why. Maybe it's the power of the brand. Maybe it's the associated benefits that and features that your product feels a little bit different. Maybe it's positioned a little bit more differently, and people are like, "Oh, this one does this. This has this." And if you answer the question in the mind of the consumer more effectively than the competitors, will they buy yours over the others, even if you're higher priced? I mean, I think a lot of marketplaces will prove that yes, they will. A lot of times, photography is a differentiator in such a way and to such a degree that people will be like, this one is higher quality. And you say, well, why is it higher quality than the other one? The photography is better. Well, that makes no sense at all, except for an e-commerce context where the photo is a proxy for reality. And so, I mean, these are the elements that go into being a high-priced leader and thinking through those dynamics. Um, a lot of little nuances as well. Michael, you would have insight into this, but I know a lot of people have said there's a pricing opportunity when you're FBA seller on Amazon versus merchant fulfilled. I don't know if that still holds up as much anymore now that there's, uh, you know, the alternates that are somehow in between prime, merchant fulfilled, or whatever it is. But I know that people have said that those dynamics also allow for pricing discretion and interesting opportunities. Any thoughts on that?
Yes. So the three options are merchant fulfilled, which is when you just do it yourself, and then it's FBA, fulfilled by Amazon, and then seller fulfilled prime, which is hard to get, but if you have 90 days of good metrics and you can do the fulfillment yourself and you have certain capabilities, you will be then prime eligible, even though you're fulfilling it yourself. So the critical piece is prime eligible versus not
Hmm.
prime eligible. And basically, you're basically right, because if you are prime eligible, you will get roughly twice the exposure in organic rankings. Maybe it's 2/3 more, but it's a heck of a lot more, and that's really critical because you can do more volume, and thus you can, if you
Yeah.
choose to translate that into the same amount of visibility, fewer sales, but at a higher price, or you can translate that into same price, more sales. So it absolutely does relate to that.
There's a concept, star principle related, 80/20, Richard Koch, and it's basically this idea that like those who have get more. And if let's say for example you've got a competitor who's priced at $10 for the thing, and you price at $13, but you're number one in the category on Amazon, and they're number like 12,
Hmm.
the benefits accrue to you. People will
Yeah.
say you must be better, and so some of it just is the BSR is a differentiator that would permit for higher pricing and premium pricing, and it compounds it. It's like it doubles down on itself. It's a virtuous cycle. You're higher priced, therefore people trust you more, therefore people buy more, therefore you have a higher BSR, therefore you can justify your pricing for the long term. So those elements aren't to be ignored or missed out on, and conceptually, I mean, you want to lean into those ideas.
Yeah, I agree entirely. It's funny that you're saying BSR Amazon reference. I'm going to do an off Amazon reference then, just to balance things out, in case the BBC kind of watchdogs are listening for balance here. This applies off Amazon as well. So the same with Google. I believe that 75% of the clicks accrue to the top three, maybe five
Yep.
positions on Google. So that means that there's an element of, once you're installed at the top, there's a self-perpetuating element, as you say, and I absolutely couldn't agree more. I suppose what people are often trying to do, particularly with an Amazon launch, to come back to Amazon, but not only Amazon, is that they're trying to install their product as the premium product by making sure that it ranks very high. Now, that's only
Hmm.
going to work if you, quote, stick the landing, as people call it.
Mm.
In other words,
Right.
once you stop spending like a crazy person on advertising and you allow your price to go up a little bit, you kind of start with basically penetration pricing, which I know is something else we've got to discuss. And then at some point, you try and raise your price and see if it sticks. But that's the acid test. That's the launch strategy is not a premium pricing strategy. It is the way to kickstart a premium pricing strategy, I would
Right.
say. If the elements
Yeah.
are not in place, what happens is your product rises to the top and you're really happy until you look at your bank account, which is hemorrhaging money and giving it all to Amazon.
Yeah.
And then you stop hemorrhaging money and then it drifts back down. And if you're really unlucky and you're not mindful about your pricing strategy, to your point of having one, really important, because what happens then is you react and go, oh my goodness, and you start throwing money at Amazon ads again, and then it goes back up the rankings and you sort of, bob back and forth.
Yeah.
That's pretty
There's
disastrous and very common.
Yeah, but on the positive side, on the opportunity side, if you're as they say, the victor goes the spoils. Let's say all things being equal, you're competing with 25 other people selling the same thing, but not the exact same thing as a reseller or arbitrageur, but in a similar niche, with your version. Um, the one with the most reviews is a victor.
Yeah.
You might have best selling rank because you have the most reviews. Therefore, can justify a higher price.
Mm.
Therefore, you'll have, because you get more reviews coming in, that kind of virtuous cycle. So there's a reason that phrase "to the victor goes the spoils" is used, because it's in these situations. So anyway, so this is an overview of premium pricing or luxury pricing that I think people want to think through. And if they can take that position or figure out how to engineer the taking of that position, it's well worth the time and effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we spent quite a lot of time on premium pricing. No apology
Yeah.
for that, because it's obviously something we all desire, well, many of us desire. But then the
Yeah.
second strategy is a little bit different. So tell us about that. What's the second
Yeah. The
strategy?
second pricing is what most people do, which is you could call it neutral pricing, or competitive priced offer. It is basically matching your competitors. So neutral pricing is the phrase. The neutral pricer is someone who's taking an audit of all the other sellers on in the marketplace that's selling something similar and saying, okay, the average is $22. I'm going to price mine at $22. So you don't want to be the high, you don't want to be the low, you want to be in the average. There's a lot of reasons to do this, and all things being equal, what that type of analysis is telling you when you look at all of the sellers and the price points, what the market is telling you is what the average consumer will pay, and there's logic in being in that zone. And sometimes you can be too smart by half, or as I like to say, do a half a backflip and do pricing strategies that are just too complicated. When in fact, everyone's selling their goods at an average price point of $22. You too should be at $22. And so, that's the simplest plan to go to market with. That's what most people do if they do back of the envelope thinking or strategy is kind of, okay, what's the gut feel for what these are priced at, and I'm too going to price mine, or the Me Too pricing is going to be in that range. So it's very straightforward, very simple idea there.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that strike me as a sort of counter to that, which is the middle is normally the most crowded place because most people come to the same conclusion.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean it's wrong to be neutral or competitive driven by your price, but I think that that there are some downsides I think you need to be aware of. One is that I've seen that it can be quite unstable in terms of sales, because what tends to happen is if you're ranked for, say, this is a simplification of life, but if you say there's one or two keywords that matter the most for your product on Amazon specifically, and say you're ranked number 3 for whatever it is, blue plastic widget, whatever it is, you may find that you bot between number 5 and number 12 and go on to page 2 when you suddenly get a lot fewer sales. Like, I mean, it could be 10x fewer by just
yeah,
changing rank a few
yeah.
positions. Whereas if you're consistently at number 1, 2, or 3, you'll find a lot more stability. So there is a cost to be paid for that is
Mhm.
non-obvious, I would say, that I've seen quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you're average, and average doesn't stand out, and so that's the problem. And yeah, I totally agree. So for all those reasons, I spend the least amount of energy and thought on that neutral pricing strategy. Um, I think it's the least interesting option. I think the third option we're about to talk about is the most interesting of the three, and the game that most people play. And so, this third idea, if I just jump into that, is is the idea of being the low price leader. Technically, it could be called penetration pricing, where you're trying to take market share by having your price be structurally engineered to be meaningfully lower than the average, as well as what most the better or most strong competitors' pricing looks like. And that penetration pricing or low pricing strategy, there's a lot of gamesmanship or strategy associated with that we want to talk through here in a moment. But it's an interesting thing to think about. Now, we've talked about premium, and now we're talking about being the low price leader. So those are the two ends of the spectrum. To your point, Michael, a few moments ago, when new private label brand sellers, for example, try to launch a new item, new product on Amazon, frequently they'll try to play in this penetration pricing space. They'll try to be the low price leader to gain bestseller rank, to gain reviews. That's the common thing to go to market with. Most people don't go to market with a new product and say, I'm going to price this twice as high as everything else. Most of them try to say, I'm going to price this lower than everything else. But there are risks and downsides to this that are obvious and problematic that we want to talk through. But anyway, so that's the third idea is being a low price leader.
And I think a lot of people get a bit fooled by when they do premium pricing, they see the dollar signs in terms of the per unit economics. And I think that they can see the dollar signs of penetration pricing when it's done badly, shall we say, in terms of the unit volumes. And I think that people get a bit fooled by public corporate strategy from big corporations that may be selling in the same places. They may be next to you on the Google results, or if you're on Amazon, they might be selling next to your product. But if you've got Tesco or Walmart or Amazon, they can borrow at a large amount of money at 1 or even 2% a year. In Amazon's case, at least it has been historically, probably higher now. And they have public investments, so they have a massive amount of money. So profit and even cash flow does not have to be a priority for them, and it does for most of us running our own small or medium-sized businesses. So I would just caution that you need to your point, have a real strategy around this rather than falling into it, which is something I've seen.
Yeah, totally agree. And so then the question is, how do you do this? How do you do it successfully? How do you become the low price leader or engineer it in such a way that you can maintain that? And I think there are elements of that that are critical. You can obviously be the low price leader any day of the week with short term tactics and strategies. So there's 3 or 4 of those that we could talk about here. I'll just rattle them off, and we can, if any of them pique your interest, we can jump into them. But the first one is just run a sale. It was like, okay, that's pretty straightforward. I'm the low cost leader today because I'm running a 25% off sale. So if the average price is, let's just do the math in our minds, $20, and I'm taking a whack at it, and I make my product $15 for 3 days or whatever, am I going to be the low price leader? Yes. Is it sustainable? I don't know. So those are the things to think through. So a sale is simple. And there are a lot of reasons you can do a sale, but there are other ways you can do this as well. You can have, for example, what's called a loss leader product. Now, many retail stores do this. They have an item that they're willing to sell at a loss because they know when you come to their store, you're going to buy 2 or 3 or 4 other things that they have good margin on. That loss leader strategy is something every e-commerce seller can do. I always talk to people about having a digital item that's, referred to as an ethical bribe to sign up for your newsletter list when you set up a Shopify store. That digital item that's given away for free is considered a loss leader. It costs you something technically to have created it, so I think that's a key part. The third thing you can do is you can create the ethical bribe, as I just mentioned. And I guess that's obviously similar. Just build that and give something away for free. And the fourth idea is to do a tripwire. Now, a tripwire is a strategic front end low priced item that has a logical upsell. So a little bit of nuance there. It's like, what's a good example? Sell a remote control that needs AAA batteries and sell it for $3, but then sell the AAA batteries for $44. That kind of idea. It's part of a system that allows the customer to take a first step, but then the second step costs them money. And you balance strategically where you make money or don't make money to get that system going. So those are a few ideas about how to become structurally a low-cost leader.
Yeah, this is great stuff. And I think that a lot of us in the Amazon-focused world tend to over-focus on sales and short-term discounts. And I think that's fine as long as A, you've got a good reason for it, and B, it sounds obvious, but you add up the overall profit on that product line over the course of a year. I mean, I find an awful lot of people discount like crazy for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and that drives volume. It certainly gives customers great deals, and it gives Amazon a lot of money. But a lot of the times, I find a lot of people get less and less excited about that because they realize over the years they don't make much extra profit. So you got to have a really good reason for a sale, and everyone else is doing it is, in my opinion, and that of my more experienced clients, not a good reason. The loss leader thing is great. I think on Amazon, it's really hard to engineer the fact that you get people to buy one product and then cross-sell to another one.
Because they can buy the second product from anybody on Amazon, not from
Exactly
you.
so, yeah. So there's a very good reason to have, a place that you can sell yourself if you can get that to work. That's a whole different set of economics. The ethical bribe, I think, is underused by Amazon sellers. It's a good reason to have a website that you can capture emails on, even if you don't do any selling on it. I think the sort of hybrid where you have, say, a site that ranks well on Google for SEO, which is not free traffic because you have to pay for the writers up front or spend a lot of time on it yourself, but gives you traffic again and again, and email capture, and then getting people to buy on Amazon is something that I see the savvier people doing more and more of, and I think that's a really good way of getting some of the best of both worlds. And then finally, the tripwire sale, well, that is a reason to have your own D2C site because then you can control the funnel that people enter. The only way I can think of that you would do it on Amazon is if you were mentioning remote control and batteries, but I mean, the classic is print cartridges, right? So you sell a printer, an inkjet printer for $40, and then you sell them replacement cartridge that will do a whole 200 pages for the next 5 years. I mean, it's a great thing to be on the selling side of, or slash terrible thing to be buying, I think. But that's a great example of where you could kind of have a tripwire sale on Amazon and it would work.
Yeah, that the old classic original idea before the internet age was the razor blades and blades model. Give away the razor and sell the blades, and that
Yeah.
that type of idea was the analog version of this idea from the olden
Well, and the
days.
Dollar Shave Club is still a valuable commodity, and Gillette's not doing badly.
Mhm.
I think razors is still it still works, even though it's the oldest thing in the world. I guess that's
Oh,
why
sure.
Warren Buffett was an investor. So, but
Yeah,
you're right, razors, even better example. You're right. I was just thinking of inkjets because I always found I
yeah,
used to get through a lot of those until I realized and bought myself a laser printer.
yeah.
And that's much to the
The,
chagrin of everyone who sells inkjets printers.
yeah,
Um,
I was just going to say the difficulty with that model is you just have to be really ethical and honest because you know people do not appreciate the Apple phone that goes obsolete in 2 years version of reality for no apparent reason. If you sold the razor and blades model and those razors lasted for eternity as sharp as ever, you wouldn't have that opportunity. There's a reason why guys are willing to say, I need a new razor blade because there's pain involved in shaving when you don't have a new razor blade. And so there's an inherent, I need something new here. And you can't fake that. You can't create a product system that doesn't really, with integrity, support that idea, or customers will just be like, you guys stink. This is dumb. I'm going to find a provider that actually gives me the whole product in totality because you're a gimmicky product seller. And so you just want to walk that line carefully and think through: is there justification for that type of tripwire or step one, step two product approach?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I know that that's a sort of challenge. That's an external slash market challenge or marketing, market perception. What about the internal challenges? I know in your book you say that
Mhm.
you need to be pretty aware of some financial numbers if you're going to make penetration pricing work without going broke. So what are the things that we got to look out for there?
Yeah, three things stand out. The first thing you've got to be clear on is what your cost of customer acquisition is. So to acquire the customer. Now, most Amazon sellers don't contemplate that as a number. They just say, am I successful on Amazon? Yes or no. And they know that they've got whatever it is, the 15% fee structure on Amazon plus whatever adds up to whatever amount the current fees are. I don't know, 15% or I don't know, whatever it is. So, but that number, that crucial number is the cost to acquire a customer. People who sell on their Shopify site direct to consumer have immediate math to work through to figure out how much can I spend in advertising or other strategies to acquire a customer. And so that uh, customer acquisition cost, CAC, is what it's referred to commonly, is the first number you need to think through. Second number you need to think through is just obviously what your unit economics are. What does it cost you to deliver the goods? If you've got a product that's got 12 times, 15 times markup. And those do exist. There are contexts in which because we work with clients that have that reality, there are opportunities like that. Then, you've got a huge opportunity with pricing discretion. If you're trying to sell something for Keystone pricing where you bought it for $5 and trying to sell it for 10, uh, you're in a very, very hard position in this conversation. But anyway, so you've got to know that unit economics number, and then the third thing that you really need to have a handle on is what you might call general and administrative costs of your business. What is the load of expense dollars that you need, and you can make that a per unit number. So, for example, in simple math, if your overhead costs for your business are $100,000 and you sell 100,000 units in a year, then your overhead load or your contribution to administration would be $1 per unit. So you want to think through that because the back end of your business has to be paid for, and that's why obviously that multiple, that markup on your cost of goods is vital. the bigger it is, the more you've got to play with to build a business. And so those three numbers I think are key to think through to figure out, what can you do in regard to being a low price leader. You certainly can step into a niche where people are just greedy and people have huge margin and you're willing to be lower margin, higher volume. And if you're in an industry like that, you can take the low price leader position and do it well. Generally speaking, there's a low price leader in every market, in every niche. And if you're not it, it's hard to beat that person unless you beat them on the merits of your supply chain and your business efficiency. Because all things being equal, over time, you won't just say, I'll live off less margin than they do. You have to build a business that successfully runs itself, living off less margin than they do. And that's hard work. And you can't just say, well, I'm just going to spend less on toner cartridge and eating out and that kind of thing. Um, and maybe you can for the short term, but you've got to think through: is my business sourcing the product and making it cheaper than these other companies? And I think that's vital.
There's a story in, I think it's in the Star Principle, about Filofax. Now, this is fascinating because Filofax kind of created a market which was, you know, called a Filofax, or whatever you call it generically, a bit like Hoover is the word we call a vacuum cleaner in the UK, because it kind of created the market. And they were also the leader in the market, as is often one of the best ways, the classic kind of Richard Koch suggestion or strategy. But the thing, it's kind of died as a company into, not died, but it became very mediocre. And the reason was they'd done two things on the customer end. They become premium pricing to the point where they were just over expensive for what they were. It was leather with a lot of sort of diaries and organizational systems on paper, for $150 or something. It was just overpriced. And one of the reasons was they had incredible selection, and they'd allowed their back end, their overheads, their general administrative costs you mentioned, to balloon their overheads. So Richard Koch came back in, and with somebody else, actually, they took it over and they reduced their overheads. They reduced the unnecessary amount of varieties because people didn't need it in
Mhm.
calf skin or leather purple or something. And they in the same market as themselves, they became the sort of mid-price, so lower cost, and as a result it became, again, what he would have called a star business. So that's one business that was a star business, overpriced itself, and then became a star business again, and sort of took back a leadership of the market that it had created, which is fascinating because
Mhm.
it kind of encapsulates both premium pricing and the dangers of premium pricing, and then how to
Yeah.
become the person that takes the money off by seeing there's a position below the premium.
Yeah,
um
I think the takeaway here is all of us are operating, and this I love this phrase. It's called, yeah, I heard it once and it stuck in my mind. The real world of competitive marketing. That's what we're operating. We're all dealing in the real world of competitive marketing. And that means people are going to zig and zag around you and underneath you, above you, side, next to you, in terms of their pricing, their positioning. If you're the high price leader, they'll make fun of that and be the low price leader. If you're the low price leader, they'll come in and try to be the high price leader. So it's all a cat and mouse game against your competitors. And if you're playing against a really savvy competitor that really has a lot of tools in their tool belt and have thought through this very, very well, you can be in a very hard position. Fortunately, in many, many niches online, we are competing against people who haven't given a second thought to their pricing. They're just throwing it out there with average, run of the mill, standard, neutral pricing, and we can be more creative than them. But there are tricks and to think through, or I guess you could say complications to think through, that you have to solve on both the premium pricing and on the low price. A great comment just came in from somebody listening live with us, and that's, "Good Lord, I don't want to be the low price leader. It cheapens my product." And so this is an interesting comment that I think speaks to the situation, which is the trick with being a low price leader is not devaluing your brand. Now, can you think of any low price leaders who haven't devalued their brand? In my mind, one immediately comes to mind, and that's IKEA. And the other one that immediately comes to my mind is Target. And then I don't know how it is in the UK, but in the US, Target is like just the incredibly much loved brand for kind of the younger female demographic. They just love to go to Target. They find high quality stuff for affordable prices, and it hasn't cheapened their brand. So, but that's the thing to sort through. If you do become the low price leader, how do you brand yourself in an interesting way so that it doesn't devalue the offering and have people think, oh, that's just junk, or it's lesser or inferior than the other items.
Absolutely. I mean, IKEA is also very beloved in the UK. I can't think of the equivalent of Target, although Aldi is becoming quite beloved amongst the younger who want sort of good value. My wife loves a bargain, to the point that EQ Chair Handmaids has said that sounds like the response of somebody who, in their heart of hearts, wants to be a premium pricing person, considering the possibility of penetration or low pricing, which is fine. In which case, stay premium. But what I would say is that sounds like you're starting from a point of premium as the good thing, and then cheaper means bad brand. Whereas, of course, the good, cheap brands, as in low cost, have a very strong loyalty and brand just for value rather than for extremely high quality. So Asda in the UK is a fairly well liked supermarket. I think that has a good reputation. Aldi is really starting to take market share off them because it has a reputation for very, very good value. And
Yeah.
I'd say the
Yeah.
quality of their food is very good value. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's a different kind of brand reason why people are loyal to your brand, right? I guess it comes down to value as the primary driver, or maybe some other qualities that you have that you can provide.
I like to use the phrase an appeal to value,
Hmm.
and Target's making an appeal to value. Walmart's making an appeal to value. IKEA's making an appeal to value. Those customers who walk into an IKEA, for example, because I think that has one of the stronger brands of the three, but or Target, they're walking into the store itself saying, "I love this brand because it's a great business offering me a low value, a low priced item that's high value." So in the mind of the consumer, they're playing with this idea of brand loyalty and respecting and valuing the brand because it's offering them an appeal to value. Um, that's something to think through. That's the power of a strong brand, and you have to have that to play that game, or else you do become just an inferior competitor, which is not the position you want to be in. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just final thought on that. An example is that to the point of being a beloved low price leader, but that's the kind of consumer side of it. If you build a business that can live off that, then that's the only way to keep it sustainable. So that can lead to a lot of complexity on the back end to produce something that consumers perceive as very simple. So Ford, for example, Henry Ford, when he created the Ford motor car, did a lot of work with vanadium steel, which involved metal alloys, new complex, very modern, never done before manufacturing processes. Why? Because it would weigh less and it would ultimately be cheaper per unit. Thus, his unit economics were lower. He could mass produce it at a point where suddenly it became an explosive growth in the buying of cars rather than just being a sort of very, very slow growth because it was premium priced.
Yeah.
But the point being that he'd engineered the entire
Mhm.
process
Mhm.
to be profitable at low unit economics, as you said. But I just want to hammer that home because an awful lot of people I see falling into the trap of thinking about the one side of premium pricing, the perception in the marketplace, but not looking at the numbers. At least they
Yeah.
look at them, but only after about a year, and they're very
Yeah.
depressed at that point.
Well, speaking of vehicles, the most interesting pricer in the world right now, in my view, is Tesla and Elon Musk's strategy for product introduction and building the brand. And he did a very simple strategy. He just had a pyramid, and at the top of the pyramid was his original first product, which is a Lotus Esprit that he converted into an electric vehicle. Those he sold for something like $225,000. I mean, don't quote me, but in general, like, it was super expensive, and he sold very few of them, just like relatively small number. Then his second offering, he sold for, like, I think 120 or something like that, or 180, 189, and that was the Model S. I heard somebody the other day was selling their Model S, and the person I was talking to also had a Tesla, and they said, "Oh yeah, that's one of the Model S's that was like premium, 180 grand. You still pay 120 for those." And it was like a 7-year-old car. So, but that was the brand initiation and introduction to people as ultra premium for a reason. And then, but Elon Musk's triangle, he announced what he was doing a long time ago. The third leg in the triangle is a high production lower price vehicle, and he's going down that pyramid construct with higher volumes every new vehicle with lower prices, and the brand itself has become this high aspiration, high quality, cool, environmental friendly, car, but the prices are getting less expensive every time he rolls a new one out while maintaining this perception of high quality brand. So anyway, so those are the things that he's played with that are masterfully done, and I think we could learn a lot from those ideas.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great, sophisticated and yet simple and telegraphed, but it still works. That's a
Yeah,
fantastic example to follow, isn't it? If
yeah,
all of us could find a way of doing that in our markets, we would have a really powerful thing going. Well, look,
yeah, right.
there's clearly a ton more to look at here than just, as you say, back of an envelope pricing. There's a lot more sophistication and thought that goes into this that integrates, it strikes me, with your cost structures and your, marketing / your positioning of the product as well. So if people want to learn more about your thoughts on this, obviously the book itself, I'm presuming Pricing Power is available on Amazon these days still.
Yeah, it's only $179, and you can pick up your copy on Amazon. Just a little joke there. It's, the Kindle edition is $2.99, which, as you now know from this conversation, is neutral pricing because that's what all Kindle books are. So yeah, feel free to check it out on Amazon in Kindle or in print edition. Hope to do an Audible edition at some point soon. I think it's an evergreen topic that many people can appreciate. And if you want to just pick up a copy and read ahead, we are going to podcast about the other elements or principles in the book. But I think hopefully it's a great resource for people.
Yeah, Kindle book for 2.99. That's quite frightening to a lot of booksellers. So Amazon saw the opportunity to penetration
There you
pricing
go.
in the book market, and look what that's done for them. So that's an interesting example to
Another
wrap up.
example. Yeah.
Multiple examples today. Well, look, folks, final thing to say is, first of all, thank you for joining us live if you did. And if you want to follow us on the Call-In app, then please do find us there. That's available on iPhones at the moment only. On podcasts, however, we're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and loads of things. We're actually hopefully going to be on Amazon Podcasts soon, which is a brand new venture that Amazon's just launching. And so if you want to follow us in any of those places, you can. Please do join the party. We are getting increasing, particularly on Spotify, a lot of followers joining us all the time, which is fantastic to see. And finally, don't forget to give us a rating on one of those platforms if you can. A rating on Apple or indeed Spotify now would really, really help people to know that we are free but premium in terms of quality anyway. Thank you very much for listening.
Bye, everybody.